and today we're going to be taking a look at Nadia, the Secret of Blue Water, which is an anime that I've actually never even heard of before until somewhat recently. And personally, I would consider this to be more on the obscure side because not only have I not ever heard of it before, but also I never hear anyone talk about this one at all. Now before I talk about this one, there is one thing that is pretty interesting about how this one was made. So this anime was originally supposed to be made in the 1970s, but it just never happened. And one of the writers working on it at that time happened to be Hayao Miyazaki. So originally this show has some concepts of his work. So I found that to be pretty interesting. So anyways, let's go talk about the story first. So it takes place in the year 1889. But it takes place in an alternate universe, and it might seem a little bit off considering that there's a lot of things that, wouldn't happen at that time. But because it is an alternate universe, well, that doesn't really fucking matter. So one of the main characters is named Nadia, just like in the title. And she is a teenager who doesn't know anything about her past. And the only thing she has from her past is a blue pendant called the Blue Water. But no one knows what it's actually used for. Hence the title of the show, Secret of the Blue Water. And then you got Jean, who is a young inventor, and he ever just so happens to be attracted to Nadia when he first laid eyes on her. Also, I'd like to mention that Nadia carries around a baby lion named King. So after when they first meet each other and he happens to get rejected by her, and there happen to be 3 jewel thieves that are after Nadia's pendant, and they consist of Grandis, Sanson, and Hanson. Now one thing I would like to mention about them that I find to be pretty funny is that they really remind me of Team Rocket, because Grandis is a girl that happens to have red hair, and she's always trying to smarten up the other two. And then Sanson is pretty tall, and he happens to be pretty flamboyant. And then Hanson is short, but he always likes to try and do things the smart way. And keyword, I said tries. So I'm pretty sure you can see the connection between this and Pokemon's Team Rocket. I mean, Grandis is like Jessie, Sanson is like James, and then Hanson is like Meowth. So after realizing that, that actually kind of amused me. So anyways, they always happen to try and capture a pendant but always fail in the end. And sometimes they usually like to use a big clunker tank, but no, this one does not look like a Magikarp. So after when those two get away from those guys, Nadia pretty much has nowhere else to go because she got sold out of the circus. So Jean tries to invite her over, but that doesn't happen so well, so they just happen to go to a secret place known as his workshop. And the workshop is where he keeps all his inventions at, and, well, most of them don't even work properly. But eventually the 3 thieves catch up to them, and then, well, they have to escape permanently. And Nadia starts to think that she's actually from Africa, so Jean tries to fly her using a prototype airplane sort of thing. And they do get away from them again, but this time they happen to be stranded in the middle of the ocean. But eventually a battleship comes and rescues them, but then a sea monster ends up attacking the battleship, so they end up getting stranded in the middle of the ocean again. By now there is a giant futuristic submarine that came and saved them, and the captain of there happened to be named Captain Nemo. And yeah, I forgot to mention that this show is actually loosely based off the book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but mostly has a unique twist. Now one thing I did find to be pretty amusing about the captain is that he actually looks almost exactly like the captain from Macross. And at first you're probably wondering, well, how the hell did they get away with this? Well, that's because the same animator of this show did Macross as well. So that's kinda awesome to know. But anyways, Captain Nemo is a pretty mysterious character and he doesn't want any of the outsiders to know everything that they're doing, so he happens to want them to leave. So Second in Command Electra happens to send them off to a random island. And she says, hopefully from there you can get back to France from there. But, yeah, that doesn't happen. And while on that island, they happen to meet someone named Marie, who is a little child. And she doesn't remember what just happened, but what really happened was that her parents got killed by a group of guys that just happened to look like a mix between Nazis and KKK members. Okay, that's kind of a scary thought. So those guys are called the Neo-Atlantean Force. And what they want to do is that they want to try and take over the world, and they also want to capture Nadia because she has the secret of blue water. So that generally sums up the plot. I mean, you get 2 main characters who are on an adventure trying to figure out one of them's past, while there's a war happening between Captain Nemo and Gargoyle, who is the leader of the Neo-Atlantean KKK Nazi members, whatever you want to call them. And this show is generally pretty lighthearted for the most part, and the show can be pretty damn funny, mostly because, Grandis and her gang. But I have to say, I really do like the characters in this one, and the general story is pretty good. And I do like the fact that it does use some elements from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, because that's a really good book. Now, there are 2 things about this one's story that I would like to talk more about, but I'll get there a little after, so for now, let's talk about the animation. and I must say the animation is actually pretty damn good. I mean, this is coming from the same person that did Macross, so that's pretty awesome. But it does have a pretty different style, where this time the style does have a Miyazaki touch to it. Now, not exactly like it, like I said, just a touch, and I think that's really nice. So overall, I have to say that the animation is pretty damn good. Now as for the music, I have to say the background music is pretty great. Probably one of the coolest sounding themes in this show would have to be the theme of Gargoyle. I have to say, it sounds pretty badass. I know the other songs do sound pretty good and suit the theme as well, so that's all well and good. And as for the opening theme, I have to say I actually really like it as well. It's pretty upbeat, and well, I just really like it all around. So when it comes to music, I think this show really got it good. Now as for the voice acting, to be quite honest with you, this is probably the worst part, at least if you're watching it in English. Now there are two different dubs, but the one I happen to watch happened to be kinda crappy. Now all the voice actors here, I don't even recognize any of them. So you got Meg Buman, Nathan Parson, Ev Lunning Jr., Sarah Richardson, Martin Blacker, and Corey Gang, and a bunch of others, but like I said, I don't recognize any of these people. And as I said, I think the voice acting is pretty bad. Now, it's not the worst thing I ever heard, I mean, at least this is better than Thunderbirds. But not by a lot, because a lot of the voices here are really odd. I mean, some of them sound like fucking robots, or some of them just sound like they're bored with the whole thing, and then there's some that just sound really over the top. Because I find that the voice of Gene, he sounds like he's trying way too hard to be French. Now, I get it, I mean, he's a French character, so they need someone that can do a French accent. But man, it's like very over the top, like it's very stereotypical, like ha 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 kind of thing. Okay, well not exactly like that, but I think you might get the idea. I mean, the only voice in this show that is tolerable is the voice of Nadia. Now, her voice isn't perfect by any means, but it's at least better than everyone else. So as you would expect, the three characters that are very similar to Team Rocket are also very over the top, but at least it is kinda suiting for them, but it's not like the greatest thing ever. But at least it was pretty funny, so I will give him some credit for that. And as for the voice of Nemo, well, like I already said, he sounds like he's bored with the whole thing. Same thing with Gargoyle, I mean, he also sounds like he's like, oh, yeah, just, we're gonna take over the world. Yeah, nothing happened. But quite possibly the worst voice in this show would probably have to be Elektra. She just sounds like a goddamn robot. So that's the base of what you get for the voice acting, and well, it's, yeah, pretty bad, but it's not the worst thing I ever heard. But at least you do get some options. Now, before we talk about the score, there was two things that I mentioned earlier that I want to mention right now, and both of them are complaints. And the first one that I'd like to mention is that I find the starting of this show is pretty slow. At least for the first 4 episodes, but then after that, it actually does pick up to be a lot better, so at least that's pretty good that it's only 4 episodes and not like 10. And then the last thing that I want to mention is that there's one scene in the show I think they could have just replaced or at least changed it up somehow. Now the scene that I'm talking about is a scene where you see Murray's parents get killed. And the reason why I say that scene should be cut out is because this show is generally pretty lighthearted and it starts out that way, but then you get a scene where you see like 2 parents and a dog get shot at. Now, thankfully there was no blood or anything like that. I mean, I will give them credit for that, but still, it's very gut-wrenching. And for a show that is all like lightheartedness and stuff, it's very unnecessary. I mean, they could have at least explained it, but not actually show the stuff happening, and then there you go, that would have been fine, but no, instead they had to fucking show it to you. Now, there are other parts in the show that are also pretty damn depressing, but not like that, though. Just for one example, there's a part where Gargoyle ends up nuking an island. And yeah, the idea of that is pretty depressing, and you just see a bunch of shit get blown up, but at least you don't see any people get, like, their face and eyes get melted off. So I found the scene with the nuke going off, yeah, it was depressing, but it was at least fine the way it was, where the part where you see her parents get killed is just, like, wow. Now, I have a feeling that some people are gonna say I'm, like, nitpicking about it, but here's the thing. If I was nitpicking, I'd be complaining about a whole bunch of scenes for, like, a number of stupid reasons, but no, this is the only scene in the entire show where I found it was just really off and very unsettling. Because for a show that is supposed to be very lighthearted, you don't expect to see shit like that. So anyways, that's the only scene I'm gonna complain about, because like I said, it kinda bugged me. But everything else is pretty good, so with that being said, let's move on. So if I were to rate this one, I think I'm going to be a little bit generous on this, and I'm going to give it an 8. I found the show was actually pretty good, and it was also very interesting. But, you know, despite the 2 complaints that I already said. But other than that, though, everything else is generally pretty good. Now, I like the characters, I like the kind of story that this is, I like the setting, the animation is fucking great, and the music is also really good. And I am actually kind of surprised that this show does not get talked about as much. Or maybe it's just, most of the people that I know just don't even know about it, or they just don't talk about it. And I don't know how popular this show was when it first came out, considering that this show came out like 3 years before I was born. But whether if it did do really well at that time, well, it seems to be kind of forgotten. And it's a shame because I actually really did like this one. Now sure, it may not be like an all-time favorite of mine or even a classic, but it was generally pretty good. So if there's one last thing I have to say is that if you at least somewhat enjoy Miyazaki films, then you'll definitely might get a kick out of this. Now I myself am a big fan of Miyazaki, and I did enjoy this one myself, so if you at least like any of that kind of stuff, then I think you might like this one. So with that being said, this one was definitely a pleasant surprise.